Now I remember why we stopped doing this. Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's of the Kerfuffle podcast. Dun, dun, dun. Hello.
We're back.
Delighted to have my compadre, Mr. Mintz. How are you, David? Looking lovely and coiffured, if that's a word.
I'm wearing official, uniform today.
Brilliant. Great starter. It's this sort of zip that people
it comes with a
one
size fits all. It's just not my size.
What have I said about we really need to start preparing for this? And we've got to say we're here because we've been begged incessantly to come back by at least one person. So thank you, Michelle Gallagher. Just like Candyman, you asked for us 3 times and we said we couldn't resist. So it's a bit disappointing that she's on holiday at the moment and won't even see this. But never mind.
She'll
the
watch
person
it on
you're going to see down there who's going to add some real structure, some real gravitas and knowledge to this otherwise amateur show is Kristjan, as he says himself, the Viking Byfield.
Hey,
Mr.
boys.
Byfield, how are you, sir?
Good. Well, that's a mantle that you've put on me there. I've got to balance you two.
Nobody blows smoke like Whaley. There's just no one out there that can do it to that degree.
I thought you were going to say nobody puts Whaley in the corner then. I was like, hold on, this is a bit of a dirty dancing tangent early on in the show.
I think you've seen a number of bouncers who have done exactly that. So, yes, let's not go there anyway. Let's keep it brief. Well, look, we're back now as the world opens up. We believe that the podcast needs to make a return. Like the Japanese knotweed that we are, we've had enough of the estate agency podcast, all these other pretenders. We're here to add some culture to what's going on. Now we're gonna jump in a second, Kristjan. We're gonna deal with a couple of the stories of the day here, but it's important to note as well. Big day for you guys, or big week for you guys, because of course V3 is unveiled, I believe.
Yes, that's right. We rolled it out just towards the end of yesterday, and really exciting. Several months in the pipeline, big changes. So, love to talk a bit more about that later.
And just to make the point, that's V3 of the Depositary, not of base, because that'd be a bit weird.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Can I get a more significant timeline here?
Yeah.
You're about to become a dad again, aren't you?
Yeah, any day. Due date's 11 days away, but the missus keeps on saying, "Oh, he's going to come any minute." And I'm like, "You better not. You better not. I've packed my schedule up to the 21st. I've got so much, and I've got too much work to do."
I was so desperate to jump on the podcast.
I keep having words with Arlo. I'm like, you stay in there, mate. You do your job.
This could be the first property industry podcast that features live streaming the birth of a child on. And this could be amazing.
I don't think anyone wants to see that. And my missus is pissed off enough with me already. I don't think
we've only just returned. Don't get us barred again.
It's the beauty of birth, my friend, and it's worth sharing with the world.
So let's catch up in the normal way anyway, because it's a Friday. We're all looking at the weekend. What sort of week have you had, Mr. Byfield, yourself anyway, apart from obviously the fantastic news? Been a good week for you?
Yeah, I mean, good. The London rental market has gone insane. It sort of followed I now kind of understand what a lot of the bonkers sales agents have experienced over the last few months. It's sort of universally, it seems like everyone has had a private meeting and gone, "Shall we all move back to London now?" And they've all gone, "Yeah, let's do it." It is mental. Like, great for us as agents. I genuinely pity looking for properties at the moment. I mean, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. Like, we put a 2-bed flat on the market last Friday night, came in Monday morning to over 100 inquiries.
Wow.
And I would say typically in a normal market, 10 to 15 inquiries is what we would expect. In the busy summer season, 20, 25.
So Kristjan, how many viewings do you reckon? I mean, let's say you whittle that 100 down to
6 or 7. I won't let more than 6 or 7 people see a property. It's just no point. We've got, we'll to a certain extent cherry pick out of those viewings in terms of we'll know what's going to get across the line. But yeah, we will typically do a 1 hour block viewing with 10-minute slots. We'll go. I mean, that property in question, we booked 7 people in. All 7 people offered above the list price. I don't think I've ever shown a lettings property where every single viewing offered.
So it's a great time for landlords at the moment, isn't it?
So we're getting rents above pre-pandemic rents at the moment, which is crazy.
And what do you put it down to?
I mean, much like with the sales, it's phenomenal demand. There's only so many properties, and like I said, literally everyone has decided to return to London at the same time. So I think you've got that combination of students, which are always busy at this time of year. They would normally secure a property a month or 2 ago, but I think mum and dad, having got burnt last year, renting a property that their kids never set foot in, and then having to pay the rent for a year, I think a lot of mum and dads went, you know what, darling, get to London, and we'll sort it out when you get there, because I'm buggered if I'm paying for a property you're not living in again. So what would have happened in the last month or 2 is all happening now. And then on top of that, you've got a lot of offices saying, right, come on, peeps, back to the office. You know, it's interesting talking to the guys who come into Liverpool Street, which is about a 10-minute walk from here. You know, and several of them commented saying, you know, after the last sort of 18 months, 2 years of walking past ghost town offices, life is starting to show. Lights are on, people are at desks. You know, we always knew that was going to happen, but it's all happened at the same time, and it is insane.
The commuter stats are backing that up, aren't they, Kristjan? I was looking down at London now. This week was the busiest week yet in terms of everyone from the tube to the trains is starting to get back to anything resembling normality.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely we're definitely nowhere near normal. Definitely not still the volume of people out and about on the streets. But you know, if the changes happen that we think has, that shouldn't really happen, right? Because we're going to see a bit of flexible working. You know, London has seen an exodus. So, you know, there has been a reduction. What I think they estimate in the last sort of 4 years, London population's gone down about 10% by about 700,000.
What a fantastic segue, though, because you've just mentioned if we've changed and if we can change and if we can allow things like flexible working. So it's worthwhile us going to one of the main headlines of this week, and it's a main headline not necessarily because the story is so remarkable, but it was the public reaction to the story that really wound you up. I know it wound Carla up no end as well, but it's that story of the agent being awarded £185,000 compensation, with the Property Industry Eye headline reading, how are mums meant to have careers and families?
I think the fascinating thing with this story is for once, this isn't just, although it's about our industry, it's not just an industry story. I mean, this has been on CNBC in America. This had an hour's conversation on Radio 4. This is a massive news story. And
75 comments tells you a lot, doesn't it? That if you always gauge it by the...
I pray to God the public media don't read about 65 of those.
well, let's look at that, because this opens up that debate. So there's 2 things going on here in that story, and one is obviously that mums, and I don't think it's just mums alone, it's everybody really.
It's not mums, let's be honest, right? It's about parents. It's about parents.
It's about parents, but it's also about adapting to people's needs. So we'd like to think that we've learnt a thing or two over the course of the past couple of years. We're more touchy-feely. We're talking about mental health a bit more. We're also talking about people's work-life balance being more in line. And as I understand that, people returning to work for whatever reason are hesitant to just dive straight back in and say, yes, I'm ready to go back to that 9 to 5 or 9 to 7 or whatever it was. And I might need a bit of flexibility. Yes, it actually worked for me, being able to pick the kids up from school or whatever it may do. And some of us are not willing to allow that flexibility.
Yeah, and I think this isn't just impacting our industry, right? You're seeing this. I was talking about the city offices. You know, there's been a huge debate in that. There's been some very big companies already come out and go, that's it. We're getting rid of all of our leases. All of our staff can work from anywhere, flexible hours. You've got other companies going, absolutely not. As soon as we can, it's back to office as normal. And then I think, as we all know, I think the reality is it's going to be somewhere in the middle. But the bottom line is that there's got to be that flexibility. And I think that we can apply this mentality to anything. We can talk about the mentality of agents towards prop tech and services. This whole, it's always been done like that, so we'll keep always doing that attitude that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It is absolutely broken. We just refuse to evolve. So I think, that can apply to anything. And I think, we need to listen to staff. And I think the worrying thing about this whole case, I mean, firstly, is for business owners, it highlights the fact that you can't just run a business like a simpleton and just be no, 9 to 5, everyone does the same. Everyone is the same. Everyone does the same. Everyone works the same.
I want to run this business as a simpleton. I will run this business as a simpleton, Kristjan.
But I think that,
soundbite we've been waiting for all year. Thank you very much.
I mean, there was some interesting response to the story. So, I mean, first of all, I think the number one thing, there was a massive reaction, first of all, to her level of income.
Yeah.
I think genuinely some of that was genuinely just, it's a good salary. There's not a lot of people in the industry that make that salary.
That's an exceedingly good salary for the industry, isn't it? It's above the norm.
Look, I think I know from my experience at being at, some of the industry events that we go to and chatting, as you do, outside, having a cigarette with an agent from another part of the country. And, I've had those conversations where I'll talk to an agent, let's say up in Yorkshire, and we'll be talking about things and they'll be like, oh no, can't do lettings. Like, what's the point? The sort of money you earn on that, and then we'll be talking about sales. And then we drill down into it and we'll earn more per year on a lettings and management fee than they do on a sales fee. Yeah. So there is what a lot of agents need to understand is London's mental. You go on that I had a quick look at that agent's sales stock. I think the cheapest thing is about 450 grand, but their highest sales listing was 14 million pounds. And then their rent start at about 450 a week, going up to 20,000 pounds a week.
Yeah.
That's £1 million a year in rent. Yeah. So if you let and manage that at a typical high-end let and management fee, 17%, you're earning £170,000 a year letting and managing that one property. So, agents need to get past looking at that like it was their business. It's a high-end London agency working in a really high-end market. And the bottom line is we all know that the large proportion of that income will be commission and performance related, which ultimately has got nothing to do with when you work.
Absolutely. And the other responses that we got, unfortunately, were the same old misogynistic comments that we read. And it's easy to make these comments because you can do it absolutely anonymously. If you want to change your name to the Viking and make those sort of comments, you get away with it.
Yeah, I think he needs to change it a little bit more than that.
Yeah, the Viking, that one. Yes, that one.
Look, I've always made the decision. I'm registered on all the major industry blogs as Kristjan Byfield or K Byfield. I've always made the decision to post as myself. There are times where I've written a comment and gone delete, not for the same reason that some of those comments shouldn't have been posted, actually more for business sense. I don't want to burn my prospects too much, and I'm sure I've probably burnt a couple of Depositary prospects with my comments on that article. But I think sometimes that risk is worth it. But look, I think there was a small argument for people being able to comment under a pseudonym on high-value articles with particular insight.
It's not like this is arms industry whistleblowing.
We're not MI5, are we? We're not. It's. But I think So look, there's a classic example of Chris Wood. A few years ago, who was very outspoken about several matters, and that had a very direct impact on other matters in his professional life. And so that raised an argument for people being able to comment from an informed point of view, but under the protection of a pseudonym. But that is honestly the only case I can think of. I think this article has put the final nail in the coffin that I don't think there is any justification for our industry blogs to permit anyone to comment without a verified profile of who they are.
Henry Pryor's particularly obviously well known, isn't he? Well, particularly outspoken. He does, again, very forthright, and he gets hit by trolls left, right, and centre.
If you're not willing for people to know who's saying it, you shouldn't be bloody saying it. It's that simple. And if you weren't saying it, if people knew, if you wouldn't say it because people know who you are, that's the case in point.
And we all know the reason why these people won't say it out loud with their names on it, because in their, because
it's a bloody disgrace, mate. Let's call it what it is. It is an absolute bloody disgrace what most people wrote on that article. I'm ashamed.
But do you think that this industry in particular has a particular problem with misogyny, or is it just totally reflective of the wider? So
look, I think that's an interesting one. I think that is something when we're critical of ourselves as an industry. I think for some reason we tie it into our industry, whether it be adoption of tech or this or flexibility of work hours, whatever. I don't think it's anything to do with our industry. I think it's just to do with society and culture. I don't think, whether you're criticizing this, you see a lot of these comments in tons of other fields, particularly sales-driven, high commission, high earning fields. It's a very common attitude.
In many ways,
and like I said, you can apply it as well to tech. We're always giving ourselves a kicking about agents not being very adoptive of prop tech. I actually think as an industry, I think we actually should give ourselves a lot more credit for the adoption of tech. I think there's a lot of industries out there. We give ourselves a really hard time, and we let people selling into our industry give us a hard time about the fact we're an industry of Luddites. I actually don't think we are.
Kristjan, the last check we did, the average agent has 21 different suppliers, most of those tech.
Yeah.
We are not this Luddite view that most people would have us believe.
I think that's
I know a few people who've gone to sell tech businesses into other sectors and have come back to me and gone, oh my Jesus, I thought agents were bad. I met someone who was involved with innovation at Rightmove and then pivoted to being involved with a pet tech business that was involved with selling into vets. And I had a fascinating conversation with her. She was like, if you think agents are tech phobic, try talking to veterinary doctors. I'm
gonna have to do this, Kristjan. You used the word pivot there. That's outrageous. Please try and use any of the.
So I'll change my handle to Kristjan Ross Byfield. Pivot.
Let's just have a look at a couple of these comments just to get a flavour of it. Typically you can see this one here. Good luck, Alice Thompson, with your new estate agency role. I wonder who will employ her now.
I'll employ her now. If she's worth paying 120k, I'll employ her now because she probably generated £500,000 in income.
Alice, if you're out there and you'd like to get in touch with Kerfuffle's new
employment business,
once you paid the Kerfuffle referral fee.
But the next comment's interesting, in as much as I dismissed it initially as being a little bit too tongue-in-cheek, but has he got any points at all? What I find most disappointing from her own quote is a blatant discrimination against men. What about fathers and their careers and families? There are plenty of men for who, whatever reason, need flexible hours after the arrival of a child. They too should be granted the same consideration as mothers.
I've got one comment for that.
Extent, you're on the verge of that.
White lives matter. That's what I'll say in response to that comment. White lives matter. What a load of nonsense.
I think we're taking every liberal Remainer story. Brilliant. Well,
but honestly, I read that comment and that was exactly what came to mind. Like, come on, poor men.
We've just lost 50% of the readership.
So let me ask you a question, though. Seriously. I don't know about you, but in terms of our industry press at the moment, it's extreme. Every story seems to be the same story across all the main news outlets. So, you've got the Negotiator, you've got the Property Industry Eye, Estate Agent Today. All of those seem to carry the same stories, very often, almost word for word, the same story, because they are, for want of a better word, a press release from the originators, and it's become very much like advertising, and none of it's real news. Some of it, as this story is obviously real news. What do you expect them to do? What sort of standard of press do you expect in our industry? What would you have them do in terms of policing comments?
Look, I think in terms of policing comments, I think for me, verified accounts. If you want to be able to comment, you have to submit an application with who you are, what business you work with, with your email, and it has to be your account has to be approved for you then to be able to post comments. I think it's as simple as that. And if you're not willing to do that, great, you get to follow it online, and you can always, if you're really determined to make a comment, you can share that article on Facebook and write your comment on it, or on Twitter, but I wager you won't, because people will know who you are. And as I put in my comment there, I'd love to see the reaction to the vile comments on that article. I'd love to see those guys go home and say that to their wives, their mums and their daughters, and see what their reaction was, because I think they'd probably be sleeping on the driveway that night. And rightly so. So I think in terms of policing comments, I think it's just simply that. I don't think you need to go further beyond that. In terms of the content that Pi and Angels Media and Negotiator produce, I mean, look, yes, they are part of they've got to be a business. None of us pay to read the daily news pieces. They have to make money somehow. They sell advertising, and they will contain PR content. And it's again, still news. We all read about stuff and go, oh, that's fascinating, I'm going to have a look at that company. And
look, it's no different. So that all the normal newspapers carry much the same stories as well, don't they? That's a fact of life, isn't it?
And also, what are we saying? If there's no news for a week, they just put out no content for a week. I mean, that's not realistic.
No,
so
you know what? But I think, from my point of view, I would like to encourage them to perhaps ask slightly different questions. Maybe if you
more editorial.
So if you picked up the Guardian and you picked up the Daily Mail, you would expect them to have very different views. I feel that at the moment, our industry press doesn't have a point of view. It doesn't have a voice. It doesn't have.
That's fair. It's more of a regurgitation of stuff than an opinion.
Which is great. I mean, look, we've got if you want to get into a fight and raise unpopular opinions, do that on Twitter. But if we want, I think there's space still for a little bit of journalistic quality in our news. I mean, there are some days that I miss Ros Renshaw terribly.
Oh, absolutely. And look, I disagree with at least half of what he says, but let's tell it how it is. Quirky writes some good, contentious opinion pieces. You don't have to agree with him. In fact, he usually writes it on the premise that he intentionally knows 95% of the readers aren't going to agree with him.
Oh, but he doesn't read any of it, of course.
But at the end of the day, that's typically what you engage with. I think maybe could there be a bit more transparency, like you have in newspaper publications, that when something is an advertorial, it is framed as such.
Yeah.
Why not? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. A bit like Google results, right? We know which are the paid links and which are the organic links. So I don't know, maybe the industry press could start splitting stuff into bona fide news and advertorial content. The advertorial content still has value. Like I said, as an agent, I still want to know about new products and services coming to market. I want to know about suppliers rolling out new stuff, because they're not always great at communicating.
And so then you go to kerfuffle.com for your latest news.
Exactamundo.
Guys, I'm gonna change it up a little bit. We've gone from misogyny. Should we go to ARPM?
Hey. So this is a very serious subject, because we
This
spend
is
our
huge.
weeks talking about prop tech suppliers, and we talk and you know, I'm very grateful for the fact that these stories, thankfully, are infrequent. We don't have that many of them hitting our headlines, where there has been such a failure in service due to financial reasons, that a company has to cease trading. What's particularly interesting about this one, Kristjan, is that the service that ARPM offered was an outsourced property management service that took care of pretty much everything, or at least claimed to take care of everything that normal property managers would look after in-house. And it takes a great leap of faith for an agent to place that much trust with an outside provider. How far do you think this will impact now in terms of trust with suppliers?
Potentially, this could be massive for our industry and not in a good way. You know, like you said, we do have stories like this of the odd agent here and there going under, you know, with a bit of rent and a bit of deposits potentially missing and hopefully covered by CMP. And they're tragic stories, but thankfully they are few and far between. I think what is utterly terrifying about ARPM is the scale and the number of agents that they represent. Now, personally, I've always, you know, we got approached a lot by ARPM, as I think pretty much every agent did. And this is not a criticism of agents who use their service, but I personally never really understood the point, because they do pretty much everything and they took the lion's share of the revenue. Most agents wouldn't have seen much in their pocket out the back end of that. So I never really quite understood the point. I was a bit like, well, then just don't do it then, or find a really good agent to partner with that does do it. It's fair to
say these were agents that were looking for a way to add that add-on service, or to at least offer a letting service, but didn't want to get their hands dirty with it at all. It kept certain clients happy, rather than it going to another agent. That's all.
I think it's such a big thing, and you're trusting so much. I mean, you know, I've already seen agents commenting and panicking about, you know, how long is this going to go on for? How big is the fallout going to be? But in the interim, how do they keep their clients happy? Because the bottom line is their clients aren't going to give a monkeys that they've outsourced this. They're going to be like, no, you sold me a product. As far as I was concerned, I was paying you to deliver a service. So I'm holding you accountable, and I think that is terrifying.
Turn it around. Just let's say you're a client of theirs. You know, you're stuck in this scenario. What's your first port of call? What's your first action to try and deal with this?
I mean, look, I don't know as a landlord that I could trust the agency that I had trusted my properties with. I don't see, unless there was complete transparency, you know, unless an agent was completely transparent about, you know, we've packaged up a product in partner with this company that delivers it, then it's a different kettle of fish. But I would wager that most agents haven't done that, and they have dressed it up as their own offering. And so I think for a lot of landlords, that's a big trust barrier to get back. I mean, it can be fixed. I'll give us. There's a story I know of an independent agent near us, which no longer exists. They actually ended up selling up a few years ago. But long story short, two business partners set it up, grew the business really well over 5 years. A bit like Anne and I run our business. One of them very much looked after the financials of the business, and one of them was very much the sort of out on the road doing the deals. Good mates, but didn't realise what the guy on the road didn't realise was his mate running the accounts had developed a massive gambling problem. And he discovered too late that his mate had spent about £250,000 of their landlord's money. Now, fascinatingly, in that instance, he actually managed to pretty much turn that around. When he found out what happened, you know, he got his friend out the company, ring-fenced the accounts. He had a very upfront conversation with his landlords,
But
and the vast majority of them, were on board in terms of, he said, look, basically I'll apply what we owe you as credit, and we will let them manage your property, until that credit is spent. And most of the landlords were willing to go on that journey. But
I would argue that that's almost easier to get over than this will be, because one is, yes, one of our partners has gone rogue, and therefore I'm sorry, I've been left in this position. I'm going to make it right personally. The other thing is, I actually didn't do any of the service you thought you were getting from me. I outsourced it completely. I've not told you about that. I've been taking a percentage of it. The person I put my faith in with your funds has now gone, and I don't know how much of that I'm going to be able to recover. I mean, I'm hoping for some of these guys, it's only a month's rent that's asunder, but it's more than that.
But I mean, you look, even that, depending where your agents are. I mean, we were crunching some numbers in our office. Like, we only manage 150 units, and we're London, which is higher rents than most of the country. But, we worked out, if we'd used ARPM and they'd missed a 1 month's rent roll, that'd be £255,000 we'd be missing in rent.
Yeah.
So we're not talking small potatoes here. Look, I think, I have a very strong held opinion on this, largely because the agency where Anne and I met professionally and decided we wanted to start an agency and do things better was working for a man and a company where we discovered that basically he was running the business fraudulently to line his own pockets. And, that business went under, I think I'm right in saying, owing something like £4 million in rent and deposits.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And coming back to the psychology of landlords, so that was what was fascinating there. Was he was very clever in that he kept the accounting side of the business completely separate, and that he ran it out of another building about half a mile away from where the sales team were. And for a while I was branch manager at the business, and the fascinating psychology was, and this was what sort of made us believe that there was a business model in doing things right, was we would have landlords stroll into the office or call me up on the phone, or I'd call them with an offer on their flat, and they'd go, I'd give them the offer, and they'd go, oh, that's fantastic. Whilst I've got you on the phone, any idea when I'm going to receive the last 4 months' rent? And I'd be like, sorry, what? And they'd be like, yeah, I haven't received rent for the last 4 months, and I've emailed and called accounts. I never get a response. And I'm like, sorry, but you've just accepted an offer from me. And they're like, yeah, I know. But, if you can help. And I was like, I started saying to landlords, I tell you what, accept the offer on the contractual condition that your rent arrears has to be settled before the tenancy can commence. And do you know what most landlords said to that? Could you do that for me?
Okay.
I was like, can you do that for me? I was like, I'm surprised you're not standing over me with a baseball bat making me do that. I was like,
it's interesting though, because I think that landlord psychology is also a little bit like those agents that sub their responsibilities out to ARPM. A landlord always feels like he subbed his responsibility out to an agent.
Exactly.
And to a certain extent, they, in their head, maybe the model carries an element of risk that it's going to go wrong. Simon Whale, can I ask you a question? As the voice of UK prop tech, what does this story say to you? Because this is going to send shockwaves throughout the supplier ecosystem. Yeah. And in terms of agents having trust in those suppliers, we spoke about this off camera, but to a certain extent, every agent has reliance on tech and suppliers. For instance, if, I don't know, one of the major portals decided they were going to not be able to do business tomorrow, a lot of agents would be very sore about it. If you missed your website went missing overnight, if your CRM product...
Well, I think it was Agent Rainmaker, I think, made a post the other day. I think it was them that was like, what would you do if your CRM went bust tomorrow?
Yeah.
So terrifying thought.
And everyone works on the basis that someone will just get it up. I mean, in I was going to say the good old days or bad old days, people literally used to have external drives and insist that was a copy. But that in the light of cloud-based software, somebody's just assuming it's taken care of these days, aren't they? But there is no disaster recovery process, I would think, for probably 3/4 of most agents, which is terrifying. I mean, it's one thing to lose, let's say, I don't know, if you've got a marketing email system or something like that, to lose your marketing database is horrific enough. But to lose your, and never mind if it's a lettings operation as well, and it's got all your accounts information in there. I mean, that's just, that's properly disastrous.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, as Robert May alluded to in The Negotiator, I think, there's a greater oversight on accounting procedures in lettings is long overdue. There's been regulation around deposits. The reality is government in the not too distant future are almost certainly going to pivot to a custodial only environment. And I don't think there's much of an argument against that, with banks paying so little interest nowadays as well. I mean, I know we've been talking operationally. We've always been insured, but we've been talking. We're moving CRM towards the end of the year, and when we do, we've said, why don't at the same time we pivot to custodial? Because it's one less thing. We don't have to have a ring fence account. We don't have to do an audit on that every month. We don't have to pay the fees we pay for insured. So, and I think the government's going to pivot that way, but there needs to be greater protections around rent handling. The bottom line is, as agencies, we handle a lot of money that isn't ours. 90% of what passes through our accounts is not our money.
But we've got those client money protection, regulations that were brought in. So we all now have to be a member of a suitable scheme.
But there's the question. So who's going to be liable in this one? The agent's CMP or ARPM CMP?
Well, this is. I would love to know what the contractual obligation between agent and ARPM is. I mean, this is the wider question: is what happens if your letting agent goes bust? It doesn't need to be a supplier of this magnitude.
No.
But what recourse? I would imagine that you sit in line behind all the other people they owe money to, and it gets dealt with on a matter of, the largest share gets the largest shout.
Yeah. I mean, talking about, like I said, the company I worked for, there was a lot of landlords who never got that money back. That company went under, owing a lot of money. There were no assets really to redistribute. There was a couple of big ticket suppliers who I think saw a bit of money, but other than that, I think most of that 4 million just got crossed out, basically written off.
There are very few services like this, though, aren't there, within our industry, where it's so all-encompassing in terms of a outsourced service. We've got lots of suppliers that provide parts of the service, so they can facilitate payment. Some of them will deal with repairs and reporting repairs, but there's very few of them that provide a service where they take it entirely and you have no dealings with it at all. Putting your eggs into one basket, I mean, it's unlikely that we're going to see another supplier provide such a holistic service again in the future.
I mean, there's a lot.
The damage done. I don't think anyone could sell that product anymore. I don't.
It's a shame because there's a lot of really good outsourced, providers who are going to get caught in the flack of this. I saw loads of comments. Why would you possibly outsource anything? Well, that's ridiculous.
That's nonsense, right? But I think it's all about the oversight that you have. So I think the closest thing we've got to those, and I'm not turning the spotlight to these companies in any way, but the next closest thing to that is the pay collection services, right? Pay Prop, Let's Play, and Agent Pay are probably the closest things in that wheelhouse. But you still have an oversight of that product and platform. You still know what's going on. I think from what I understand from ARPM is literally pretty much you signed it over and really that was it. You didn't really have any direct oversight.
You can't stick your head in the sand just because you've gone to an outs. That doesn't. You do need to still review what's going on with the outsourced partner. That's just a fact.
I think there's also something about, obviously this was a limited company versus a public company. So I think if there was another provider to come into this space, it would probably have to do it in a public company because the accounting rules are so much stricter.
Yeah.
And there's so much more transparency about a company's performance. You look at ARPM's accounts filed on Companies House the last few years, it doesn't really tell you anything. No. It doesn't tell you anything, really.
And we're not particularly served as well as, and this all comes down to a lack of transparency. And the unfortunate thing for us, while the property industry seems massive to us, it is just a relatively small B2B marketplace, which we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, there's been luckily let's remind ourselves, these are few and far between, these kind of drastic ones, but they have happened. And one of the things that's most frustrating is social media was meant to, expose, and I'm not talking about, per se these ones or anyone, but these charlatans, these people who are in trouble there. And it just hasn't worked in the past there. Now, people do need to share their experiences. There are certain, review sites that you can go to. And this isn't me asking for people to go out there and start rubbishing suppliers. But if you are concerned about, while staying within the strictures of what, of obviously staying legal and everything else there, if you aren't experiencing top level support with a supplier, be honest about it. I mean, I've seen lots of people that talk about this very British nature that we have, that we stay absolutely reserved, don't we, until the point that we're, behind closed doors. Whereas the Americans will be very, very forthright about if they're not getting top level service. We do need to borrow a bit of that honesty to get the service we deserve.
Look, and I think this slightly brings us back to what we were talking about again, about our industry media, the question is there still an investigative journalist element there, which was there when Rosalind was there? And if not, do we need it back? Because in reality, we need somewhere within our industry, not pulling in the mainstream media who love to tear strips off our industry at any opportunity, but, really staff at a company like ARPM need to be able to approach a channel like Angels Media or Negotiator or Property Industry Eye and go, guys, confidentially, something here ain't right. We've got staff not being paid and we're worried, and we need an opportunity for people to be able to flag that. And that I completely support. We should absolutely, we need a channel where whistleblowers, or whatever you want to call it, have the ability to approach a trustworthy investigative party who can then take a potential issue and explore it and write on it. And I think Simon, without that,
Simon, as part of, we do an MOT. It's a health check on an agent's tech stack. But is there a way that we could look into the financial health of some of the companies they're dealing with, whether those suppliers are rock solid?
Yeah, definitely. It's something we've looked at, hasn't it, David? And I think there's, we've been asked by a few of our clients to say, look, before you take the final decision on a company or review your existing tech stack, is there something we can do to help out to do that? And I think it definitely needs to. If only, it's not like we're pretending to be the investigative journalist, but the problem is it's just there's nothing to help people out with at the moment, is there?
I think the other problem you've got is that, as always with products and services like that, the people who adopt that product aren't the people who need to be monitored. If you develop a product that makes it impossible to do anything remotely untowards with the funds in your account, the point is the agencies adopting that aren't the agencies we need to be worrying about. And therein lies the problem. Unless it's legislated, unless it's regulated. I remember having a conversation with a very informed, knowledgeable person in the industry, and we were having a very casual chat. And he mentioned to me a conversation he'd had with someone he knew. And again, no names were mentioned at all, but they were having a bit of a chat about accounting procedures, and they got onto the topic of deposits. And the person he was talking to was an insured deposit client, and they were talking about stuff, and he was like, you run your accounts really well, don't you? He was like, you've got all your deposit money in the account, and his mate was like, well, kind of. And he was like, what do you mean kind of? And he went, well, about 80% of it's in the bank account and about 20% of it's in the med. And he went, sorry, what? And he went, yeah, it's my yacht. And he was like, if I need it, I can sell it, I can get back to it, but that is the case. That is an example. So I think that the government legislating all deposits being custodial, I think is really should be pushed through sooner rather than later, and that eliminates that point from the marketplace altogether, and not just agents, right? Rogue landlords as well. Let's not whip ourselves too hard. There's plenty of other
from a business that deals with deposits all day and all night. Is there any difference between a custodial scheme and sort of having it an insured scheme in terms of your ability to fight off tenant claims? Do you have any more control, or in effect, is there no benefit?
I don't think realistically there's any major difference there. They all work to the same framework. I think ultimately, if you're holding the funds, you maybe have a bit more control. But something that's really interesting that's come out from a handful of our agents, and it's something I've found quite surprising in a way, like forward thinking from a lot of it, from a chunk of our agents, is what quite a lot of them like to do is actually, let's say there's a £1,500 deposit and they agree with their landlord that there's £500 of deductions that they're going to be proposing. We've got a chunk of our agents who actually what they like to do is give the other £1,000 back straight away.
Right.
Don't even worry about the negotiations yet. Here's your other £1,000, which resolves a lot of the problem that tenants have stressing about money for their next deposit. And now let's talk through the £500 deductions. And the reason I've found that surprising is, I like to think of ourselves as a very sort of service tenant orientated thing, but I quite like the fact that you've got that stick behind the door of, yeah, we're happy to give you the £1,000 back, but can we get these discussions agreed on the 500? Not in a mean way, just let's get this done and let's keep a motivation for you. I've found it really fascinating that several of the agents who work with us, that's how they like to work, and it's something at the moment we can't really facilitate. It's something that we've now got on our development roadmap to add as functionality within our platform to facilitate an early release of funds, if an agent wants to do that. But yeah, I find that that really interesting, and I think there's lots of agents out there that are constantly looking at how can we make this fair, how can we make this transparent. If I was in my tenant's shoes, what would I really want to do? And I think having seen those agents do that, there is a lot to be said for that. Exactly, that £1,000 is categorically their money, so why not give it back to them?
Kristjan, I'm conscious we're winding up towards the end, and I wanted to end it on a high.
I was going to say, I think we should definitely try and finish this on something fun and lively, because it's been
all bad news in our industry.
It isn't at all. So let's finish with that. So why should people be excited, Kristjan, to see V3 of the Depositary? Obviously, you've had a phenomenal, obviously, explosion onto the scene. Some of the really forward-thinking companies have adopted your product. What is it that they're going to be able to get out the latest version that people should pay attention to?
Well, the one thing I was always adamant about as an agent was, I think I've experienced it, and I've spoken to so many agents who've experienced it, that you get a product and it doesn't quite match up to either how it was pitched, or it doesn't maybe have the functionality that you thought it might. Or even if it's good at point of delivery, that's it. 4 years later, you're still using exactly the same product. And it was earth-shattering 4 years ago, but now it feels like, last horse in the stable sort of thing. We were always adamant that for us, and I'm a bit of a perfectionist with what we do, so it was always for us about constantly evolving. Simon, you'll know better than most, there is no such thing as a perfect software product. You can't deliver a software product. There is no such thing as perfect. And we already spent 3 years building this to a point where I was happy enough to release it. But no, I mean, we're constantly evolving. So, the major things that we've looked to do with this one, it's just about cleaning it up. So we've tried to remove a bit of the data entry for agents setting stuff up.
Yeah.
We've added in multi-landlord functionality, which is something we didn't have. So we've now added that in, which is, for some agents pretty critical. But the biggest part of our renegotiation is actually about the deductions section of our platform, the way that deductions are processed and negotiated within our platform. And we've completely redesigned that just to give a cleaner experience. So basically, before you would come into our platform, you'd have a list of proposed deductions, and you'd go in, you'd click on one, and you'd go into a new page, that just had the information about that. You'd negotiate that, you'd come back. Now everything happens on a single page. So you will negotiate all of your deductions on a single page without navigating anywhere else. It's all clear to see. One of the frustrations we had with agents was, if you propose 5 things, if one thing was particularly contentious, an agent would respond to that. A tenant would respond to that one contentious one.
Yeah.
And ignore the others, because it was like, oh, I'm not responding to the others until I've got a decision on this. And it's like, yeah, but this kind of relies on the other ones. If you're happy to accept those 4, then actually I can go back to the landlord and go, we need to revisit this one. So we've also changed it so that now the way that flows is that whether it's the agent or the tenant responding, they have to respond to everything to sort of kick that ball over to the other side. So it's hopefully a cleaner, smoother process. But I mean, we were just putting off some stats this morning. So I think we've now processed somewhere in the region of 4,500 tenancies through the platform. Last year, we were at 69.9% of deductions being agreed without any form of renegotiation. That stayed very much the same. It's at 69% this year. So it's gone down 0.9%. But we're very much still in the same wheelhouse. And I think this new rollout, actually, we're going to see that creep back up. But yeah, and we've got probably about, I would argue, about 10 really exciting features in the pipeline now, which has all come out of conversations with our agents.
I was just about to ask, Kristjan, how many of those are driven by you? How many, are you listening to your client base?
I mean, I'd say 50-50. We're pretty forward thinking in terms of we're constantly looking at what's next. But I think probably one of the most exciting things we've got in our pipeline is this sort of grouping or batching of items. So we rolled out 3 inventory partner integrations at the end of last year, rather, which was fantastic. And in most instances is a brilliant integration. The unintended consequence that we've had come out of that is we've had some inventory reports have 80, 90 dilapidations in them. Yeah. And we've had agents open their platform on ours and there's 80 or 90 dilapidations for them to review, because it's like every wall scuff is itemized. And in those instances, those agents have had to go, actually we're going to switch the integration off for that one and we'll do it manually. And the feedback came out of that of, we need the functionality to be able to clean that up. So it's fine that it imports like that, but in the next few weeks, what our agents will be able to do is, in that instance of those 80 dilapidations, they'll be able to go through that list and click on the 20 wall scuffs and just click merge, and it will pull all of those 20 things into one thing, all of the itemized evidence, all the points within the inventory. So yeah, you're still collating all that evidence. We're still about being very much an evidenced, process-driven thing. But we've delivered this integration to save time, and then there's this slightly unintended consequence that causes a new job that wasn't there. So yeah, we've listened to our agents. We've already shown probably about a third of our agents how we've mocked it up and the functionality, how it would work, and the feedback is incredible. And that's in our pipeline. I think we've got one feature to roll out next, and it will be the one after that. So hopefully we'll be rolling that out in the next.
Kristjan, where are you in terms of, obviously, did you have firm plans of where you wanted to be at this time last year, or was it all with the pandemic? Did it all go up in the air, or broadly speaking, are you where you wanted to be?
So I'd love to have more agents on board, candidly. We've got a really nice portfolio of agents that we work with, and a really broad spectrum. I think our smallest agent has 20 managed units, and our biggest agent has somewhere in the region of about 4,000 or 5,000 managed agents. That is going to be changing in the near future. But yeah, I mean, obviously we'd love to work with more agents. Like I said, I've always been a perfectionist. I don't like selling a product to anyone that I don't believe in. I won't sell a property to someone that I know is not going to be happy living there. And likewise, I'm not going to sell a product into an agency that I know isn't fit for purpose. And we've learned a lot the last 2 years. I was very proud of the product we rolled out 18 months, 2 years ago. But what we have now is light years ahead of that, and what our product will look like over the next sort of 3-4 months, we'll move on again. But with that comes implications. I need to put an official release out soon. We've started sort of tweeting about this, but from the 1st of January, our pricing's going up by 50%.
Yep.
And that sounds like a lot. But we're going from £50 a license to £75 a license, and we've got to. We've invested of our own money. Again, this is the other thing. Anne and I have completely self-funded this company. We've not got any VCs or anything like that sat behind us. To date, we've invested somewhere in the region of £350,000 into the platform. And
you candidly did it. You wanted to take the expectation level out of it, didn't you? But it's, as I famously said when you first launched, this is so far beyond a minimum viable product anyway. It's delivering hand over fist for those clients who can prove the savings there. And as I always go back to, when you see the likes of Robinson Jackson describe you as God because of what you've been able to do, you don't see that every day with most prop tech.
No, we've had some amazing bits of feedback, and look, at the same time, we know our early adopters were always going to be those forward-looking agents. They're always the one who are constantly asking how and why. Is there a better way to do this for us as a business, for our clients, for our consumers? So we always knew that the earlier agents were going to be easier for us to work with, but also more engaged. And regularly coming back to saying, it'd be great if we could do this, it'd be great if we could do that. But also understanding, what's nice, we've had a couple of agents, I mentioned earlier about this early release of funds. And in all but one case, we've had agents come to us and go, it'd be great if we can do this. And we're like, yeah, okay, cool. We'll put it in our roadmap. But just to be clear, that's probably not happening for at least 6 months. And they're like, no, it's cool. It's just great. We know you've noted it. We know it's in there. It'd be lovely to have it, but yeah, that's fine. We get it. It's not going to happen overnight.
Guys, I'm going to have to nip off because I'm jumping on funny enough, another podcast at 2 o'clock, but I will leave you in his capable hands, and great to catch up with you as normal, my friend.
Well, we'll say goodbye to all of you. Have a great weekend, everybody. Kristjan, that.
These headphones kill me. I can't go full Viking, but there we go.
Awesome. Have a great weekend, and
you too, my friend.
Let us know if anything happens.
Yeah.
Stand by.
Oh yeah. Anytime soon. Just hopefully not too soon.
Take care.
Have a good one, everyone.